I'd like to pass the floor, first of all, to Mr. Mark Tarabella, who will speak about the petition that was circulated amongst members of the Parliament and is today being sent by Mrs. Maria Arena, the head of the Subcommittee on Human Rights, to Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel. Mr. Tarabella, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Legner. Indeed, a few days before the vote of the resolution would take place on the 8th of October, Ernest Urtasun and me co-hosted an event where we focused on some issues related to human rights in Saudi Arabia. And one of the idea at the end of the idea of an action at the end of the meeting was to invite Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel, two High Representative of European Union, to downgrade the delegation who is preparing to go to assist to the meeting on the G20 summit on the 21st and 22nd November. And we have the vote of the resolution, and we took the opportunity to speak about that proposal. And Mrs. Arena, who is chair of the Subcommittee on Human Rights in the European Parliament, sent a letter to relay this initiative and to send to all colleagues to invite them to co-sign the letter to send to Mrs. von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel. Of course, we noticed, and as you mentioned, that we had a resolution where in this resolution we speak about many aspects of the issue related to human rights. Of course, it was 2 years after we organized this meeting with Ernest Urtasun, because it was the second anniversary of the death and assassination of Mr. Khashoggi. But also we remind Khalil Badawi, Mrs. Aratul, I mentioned Mrs. Selina, you are here. But of course, because activists to allow women to drive, okay, we have the speech, but the main activists are still in jail. But also we mention all other cases, and in particular, some paragraph, I have to underline that in this resolution, for the first time, despite the fact that in the negotiation, normally in all negotiation, we have the main political groups in accordance to have a large majority. And there, the EPP left the negotiation. But despite the fact, we have to mention that all paragraphs were voted by a large majority, included many members of the Christian Democrat Party, who is the biggest group, the larger group in the European Parliament. And for example, the paragraph 33rd about the downgrading of the delegation received 560 votes in favor. Of course, all the group, Renew Group, Greens Group, Socialists and Democrats, but also a part of the EPP, European People's Party. And of course, I think that it was encourageous because it was the first time. And at the end, the EPP abstained. It means that we reach a large majority to have this strong signal. And now the letter, and I conclude at this time, the letter is sent with Madame Arena and 65 colleagues who have from several political groups has co-signed this letter, included two vice chairs of the parliament, Mrs. Autala from the Green Group and Mr. Castaldo from the Not Attached. And I think that it's a strong signal. And we hope that Mr. Charles Michel and Mrs. von der Leyen will be careful to the clear demand of the European Parliament.
Thank you very much for this first analysis, Mr. Tarabella. And with that, I would like to pass on to Mr. Urtasun.
Thank you so much. It's really a big pleasure to be this morning with you. I just want to recall what my friend Mark Tarabella said before. As you know, in the last plenary, we adopted a resolution. At the beginning, some groups wanted a resolution that would only focus on the more than 30,000 Ethiopian migrants that are being held in Saudi Arabia in awful conditions, which of course is an extremely concerning matter, and that we are looking in detail. But the text we wanted, particularly the S&D, the Greens and others, we wanted to be a broad text on human rights in Saudi Arabia. We thought that was important. It was the first time that the parliament was going to adopt a resolution on Saudi Arabia after after a long time. And that's why we thought we needed to reflect on other issues. And I think we are particularly satisfied that the text talks about not only the problem of the Ethiopian migrants, but also about the issues of the women's rights defenders. We touch about the problem of the kafala system that is still in place, the case of Raif Badawi, the case of Lujain al-Hatul. I'm very happy that her sister is here today with us. So at the end, the resolution is very comprehensive and is very good. As you said, Madam Legner, the Parliament does not want to get back to business as usual in Saudi Arabia. We want to have a tough stance when it comes to human rights violations. And most important, it's paragraph number 25 of that resolution, which calls on the European institutions to downgrade its presence in the next G20. Why are we calling for that? Because we do not want to give that the EU institutions give an impression of legitimizing what's going on there. I'm very happy that the mayors of London, Paris, and Los Angeles, if I recall correctly, already canceled their participation in an urban forum, and now it's up to the EU institutions to respond to that call. So that's why, and also after the event that Mr. Tarabella and I hosted on the second anniversary of the murder of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi, that we decided to send this letter that has managed to collect significant signatures in number and in quality from the European Parliament, and I think that this is extremely good news. So voila, this is the initiatives that we've been taking in the last weeks. We hope that European institutions, particularly the President of the Council and the Commission, will hear to our request, and from our side, we will continue fighting and keeping a close eye into the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Urtasun. I would now also like to invite Lina to speak and give us a little bit of a Saudi perspective on what that means, those two positive developments on the EU level to people in Saudi Arabia, including her sister, Lujain. Thank you, Lina.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you everyone for being here today. So I'm Lujain al-Hadlul sister. As you may all know, Lujain is in prison for her activism. She's been in prison for more than 2 years. She's been brutally tortured by Saudi officials in prison. And now she is facing a trial that is ongoing and keeps getting postponed. So today I really want to thank you and thank every European MP that has led and voted for resolutions calling for the release of my sister and all human rights defenders in Saudi Arabia. I think it's important to tell you how important it is for us Saudis to have this support. Because today in Saudi Arabia, every voice, every civil society voice has been silenced. Whether if it's only commenting or criticizing governmental decisions, it's everyone is in prison. Journalists are in prison, activists are in prison, and even some people are in prison just for tweeting something. So I think when you have this regime that has totally stopped engaging with the people, and I can tell you from my experience, Lujain has now disappeared for almost 2 months. So we don't know why calls have been stopped. Visits have been stopped also. And Lujain, 2 months ago, had to go on a hunger strike just to be able to see our parents. And when my parents ask every Saudi institution where Lujain is, why she's not allowed to call, no one responds to us. Really, there's a wall between the Saudi regime and the Saudi people. And so when you have this situation where change cannot come from the inside of the country anymore, and that when people try to make change inside of the country, it's really the duty of international community to help us, people in Saudi Arabia, and to be the voice of the voiceless. So I'm very lucky to be abroad and to be able to speak about what Lujain is going through. So I think that it's very important to that the international community is by our side, and to tell the Saudi regime that reforms cannot happen without reformers, because reformers are now behind bars. So I really want to thank you for this initiative and to tell you how important consistency is. So we have to keep on pushing for their release and tell Saudi Arabia that we won't believe any reform as long as Saudis cannot make the change themselves.
Thank you very much, Lina. And well, with this, maybe I can ask a first question also on the resolution that was passed, because I think, Mr. Tarabella, you mentioned that actually that paragraph that asked to downgrade the EU representation at the G20 was a paragraph that that was voted with an overwhelming majority, in fact, of like 560 members of the European Parliament, a very broad spectrum of MEPs supporting the downgrading of the EU representation. I think only 61 members voted against. These that voted against are, the majority of them are from sort of right-wing Eurosceptic parts of the parliament. How can we understand that? Isn't it a bit strange that these people that are right-wing are now supporting the Saudi regime? You're still
not necessarily, because I don't mention some names of colleagues, because I checked the votes preciously, and also in the DARP delegation to know, and some of them, a few, vote against this paragraph, but they are all in favor of all paragraphs, and so that they are also attached to the respect of human rights. Maybe not all, but I think that, you know, sometimes those colleagues, I have a discussion with one colleague, and told me, you know, I was against this paragraph because I think it's important to go personally, von der Leyen and Charles Michel, to say directly what they think about the situation. And, you know, I think, okay, maybe they will say or not, and I think that it would be better and to be a stronger signal if they renounce to go. But, you know, I think we have probably a minority of colleagues who are not attached to human rights issue, and they prefer business as usual. We know some of them. Okay, but I think that is, in particular on this paragraph, the 23rd, on the downgrading of the delegation, some colleagues vote against, but they are also, they vote to all other paragraphs, and it's for that reason.
Okay, thank you very much. Just again, a reminder to the journalists to please post their question in the Q&A box. And then maybe I could ask a follow-up question to both you, Mr. Tarabella, and also to Mr. Urtasun. Do you already have an assessment on whether Mrs. von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel will actually attend? Are there currently any discussions being held? Is there any trends or tendency being felt? And what do you think, what signal would it send if they actually attended the G20 summit? What would that send, what kind of a signal would that send on human rights?
Well, I can start, maybe Mark can follow from what I would say. We still don't know what that decision will be. I don't know whether Mark has more information about that. We are still at the phase of pushing them to take the right decision, I would say. So for the moment, I cannot advance anything in relation to their decision. We're not aware of it. If they go, I think if they go, I personally believe it would be a mistake because indeed it would give an impression of normalization of the relations with Saudi Arabia that we should avoid. And I think that the parliament has been very clear on that. We should avoid having the impression that the relations with Saudi Arabia can resume to normal with all that is going on in the country. That's very clear. In case they go and they decide to do that, and we don't want them to do, of course, we will push them to make their voice heard in the ground in order to criticize what's going on, of course. But that's for a second phase. But because we think that the right decision and the most important political signal that you could send is exactly not to attend. But on whether they have decided or not, I still don't have any information. We are still just pushing them not to go. Mark, maybe you have more information than I do.
No, because the letter was sent Friday. They have they received the letter today or maybe tomorrow, because it depends the post service, and but also by mail, and they have to react. But I have no information about the reaction today, because it's a little bit too early.
Okay, thank you for that first assessment. Maybe to come to you also, Lina. Like, what do you think? What other action could help your sister and other rights defenders arbitrarily detained inside Saudi Arabia? And what does the hosting of the G20 in Saudi Arabia actually mean to you, or how do you assess that? And what do you expect from the international community, from political decision makers, but also from others?
I think so. For now, the most important thing Saudi Arabia is trying to do is to whitewash its image. And the most important thing to do, and the only thing that could work, is telling Saudi Arabia, we know what you're doing, and however you're trying to hide everything, we won't accept it, and we will ask for these activists to be free. And so Saudi Arabia is hosting the G20 in a couple of days. And this event really should not be a way to whitewash its crimes, or as Mr. Elnest said, it should not be a way to normalize the relation with Saudi Arabia. And so I think that it should be a platform for honest discussions. But as we have seen now with Saudi Arabia, there is no place to have, there is no room for honest discussions with the current Saudi regime. And so the only thing that for now, so we're talking about the European Union, I think the best decision would to give a strong message and tell them, we won't engage with you, with our highest officials, because you have refused to engage with us regarding major human rights issues. And so also during that event, it should be one of the most important issues that should be discussed is the faith of these Saudi activists, and remind them that there won't ever be normal Saudi-European relations as long as these activists are still in prison.
Absolutely, yes. I couldn't agree more. But I think what we've also seen already, and that is very positive, and it was mentioned partially here also by our members of the parliament, is that I think we can see sort of a slow move on, or more and more outspoken international community on rights abuses in Saudi Arabia. We have seen really these very strong signs inside the European Parliament, but very recently also Saudi Arabia did not make it into the UN Human Rights Council. We have had mayors of large cities, London, Paris, New York, and Los Angeles, boycott the city meeting of the G20, and other participants from the women's meeting drop out. And I think this is kind of very clear that we cannot go back to business as usual, and there shouldn't be normalization. And also I think that, the international community is not really buying this reformist narrative and this PR that was propagated through a large PR offensive over the last years. Maybe another question to the members of the parliament. What do you think could be next? I mean, we've already discussed the possibility of Mrs. von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel downgrading their participation at the G20 summit or not attending themselves. And at any case, making sure that human rights are being placed at the center of all discussions between the EU and Saudi Arabia. Do you see any possible next steps inside the parliament? Is there any possibility of further action? I think during this event between the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, there was a discussion on sanctions, Khashoggi sanctions, for example. Like, what could you envision as next possible steps?
We are on the 19th of October, and we have 1 month, maybe less than 1 month to push. First, it depends on the reaction of Mrs. von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel, but maybe I think a politician at the European level have done the job. And I think it's also useful maybe for NGOs and human rights organizations to push on some governments in their country, maybe to write to them also. Not to, I don't advise to send thousands of mail on that, because when we have that as, you know, it's to bomb with mail, I think it's not an efficient way. I give an example. When I receive more than 1,000 mail on, it depends of matters against abortion and so on, I told to my assistant, withdraw them without answer, because it's not a good way to do. But I think that NGOs and maybe each member of the European Parliament can also be in touch with the national authorities, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister, head of government, to send the copy of the letter that we co-signed, and maybe it's maybe the unique thing that we can do more than the letter that was sent today.
Yeah, then if I may, Madam Legner, I think that there's another issue that we have to continue looking at very closely, which is the problem that we have with arms trade with Saudi Arabia, which is being done by several member states in full violation of our common position on arms export by the European Union. And I think this is really a pressing issue as well. So I think that about the different elements on our relations with Saudi Arabia and our fight for human rights, let me remind about this important component, which is extremely problematic inside the European Union, I would say. And then, of course, there is the issue about the human rights dialogues that the European Union has with some of those member states, and how these dialogues can contribute to actual change inside Saudi Arabia. So there are different elements that we have to continue pushing for. But as Mark was saying at the beginning, I think we have a main political goal now, which is that to use the G20 presidency to show Saudi Arabia that we are not ready to resume to normal political relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarabella, Mr. Urtasun. And I think you picked up on a very important issue there, which is weapons sales and also trade with Saudi Arabia. Maybe just to quickly make that reference, that the petition letter also, in the absence of genuine human rights reform, calls on the EU to consider not formalizing deeper trade relations, investment or foreign affairs with the kingdom. And speaking of arms exports, I think some European countries have already been leading on embargoing new weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. That brings in also, I guess, in a larger way, the question of businesses that play an important role in their relations with the kingdom and the pressure and leverage they can have to push for genuine human rights reform. Maybe I would like to ask Lina on that also. What do you think that businesses can do? What is their responsibility? What do you expect from the international human rights community, the NGO community or civil society? I guess on that note, we might have to bid a farewell to Mr. Urtasun, who has other commitments lined up. I would like to thank you very much for joining us today and giving us your perspective on the EU developments.
Thank you so much for inviting, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. So, Lina, I would like to just...
Yeah. So regarding businesses and the way they could help us in our country, in Saudi Arabia, to have a more respectful legislation, or at least, in fact, respecting human rights in Saudi Arabia, I think, I've always said, it would be a double sanction for Saudis inside of Saudi Arabia to have all businesses boycott the country. So it's always very difficult to have this assessment on whether businesses should boycott Saudi Arabia. But there are other ways they could, show their their discontent on Saudi policies. And first, I think, as I said, Saudi Arabia is really careful about its image. And so even one word about from companies before engaging in Saudi Arabia or before having their businesses in Saudi Arabia saying, okay, well, we have opened something in Saudi Arabia, but we want to mention that we do not agree on this, that, and that we would really appreciate it if Saudi Arabia frees these activists while we are engaging with them, because they shouldn't be there to whitewash crimes and to legitimize a regime that has silenced all the voices inside of the country. So I think the most important thing is that these activists are free, and so that it gives, again, a voice for Saudi people inside of the country to ask for reforms as they think it.
Thank you, Lujain. Yes, absolutely. I think there is a big responsibility for business. Lina, sorry. I think there's a big responsibility, in fact, for businesses as well, and a big role to play to ensure that they're not contributing directly or indirectly to human rights abuses in the country, to follow the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, to try and engage activists in the diaspora in their due diligence, as it's impossible really with a non-existing free civil society inside the country to do that. So we do also reach out in our G20 campaigning to businesses, and we do hope that they will be as cooperative as politicians have been in the recent months and years, and we really welcome that they've become increasingly outspoken and that they're rallying with us the same cause and trying to really push for genuine rights reform inside the country. Maybe Mr. Tarabella, you would like to say something? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks to speak about that, Mrs. Saratul and Mrs. Legner, because is to give you an information. In the European Parliament now, I'm rapporteur for opinion in the Development Committee on the due diligence. It's an initiative report, no impact on the law to now, but we know already that the Commissioner Reinders, Commissioner on Law, and in the European Parliament is the Jury Committee, the Committee on Law, has intention, Mr. Reinders, to have a legislative proposal, probably a directive, maybe a rule, but we hesitate. And he will propose that in February, at the beginning of the next year. And it's to give more responsibility to company with business. Of course, I work especially in the country of in development, Africa, Asia, Southern America, but also a country as Saudi Arabia is concerned also, and company working there also would be included in the scope of the directive. And so that, I think that's, I would like to give this information because I'm careful to that. And we have to discuss on my report in several days. And we are 3 or 4 committee to have an opinion. And the jury committee will have the position of the European Parliament just before the proposal of the Commissioner Reinders.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Tarabella. I would just like to say again to the journalists that we will end shortly, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to ask them now. Maybe I could just pass the floor again to the 2 of you for any final remarks while we see whether there are any open questions from the journalists, and then I can conclude after. So Lina, I don't know if you want to maybe go first.
Maybe what's important is just giving details about Lujain's arrest, torture, and ongoing trial, because it's not only about Lujain. She represents now hundreds, maybe thousands of political prisoners in Saudi Arabia, but not all of them have siblings or family abroad who can talk about everything that they're going through. So And as we see, the new Saudi strategy is just to be silent about everything they're doing. So when they're asked about something, they just go silent, and then people just forget about all these violations. So Loujain has been in prison now for 2 years and a half. Her trial began 10 months after her arrest. During these months, she was held in an unofficial prison where she was being tortured. Then she was brought back in the official prison. In March 2019, her trial began. We saw the charges. What's also important to note is that one of her charges is that she has been in contact with a person of the EU delegation in Saudi Arabia. So they're a bit criminalizing the relations with EU officials. So this is also something that where the European Union is directly involved in this case. And so thank you again for talking about my sister and asking for her release. And so after her trial, there has been 3 sessions of the trial, and then in April 2019, it got postponed for approximately a year till February 2020. During these 8 months, Loujain was held in solitary confinement, and then she was put back in a cell with people. But this really drove her crazy because being 8 months in solitary confinement where you can't hear anyone, where you just are not used to hearing anything. So she asked to be held in to stay in solitary confinement and to gradually see people, which they accepted. In February 2020, they restarted the trial, but again, they just gave her the charges again. She gave her defense, and it was that's it. So since March 2020, there is no trial anymore. We don't know when it will start again. And even worse now, they also stopped the visit for 4 months. And during these 4 months, we didn't have calls either. And end of August, my parents had a call from the prison telling them that they're allowed to have a visit. And when they went and saw Loujain told them that she had to go on a hunger strike for 6 days to be allowed to have this visit. And since this visit, we don't have any news of Loujain, and it's been approximately now 2 months. So what we see is that Saudi Arabia violates its own procedural legislations, that it's that the regime just takes impulsive and unexpected decisions, whether it's for the visits, the calls, bringing them outside of the official prison. And so I think that we have to really keep our eyes on what is going on in Saudi prisons and never stop asking about them.
Thank you, Lina. And I think you mentioned something very important there that I'm very happy to see was also mentioned in the resolution that was passed on 8 of October, which is that actually COVID-19 was also used as a cover-up to commit further human rights violations and the rights of prisoners of conscience. So such as the delay in the trial of Loujain and solitary confinement and prohibiting communication with the family, that was picked up also at the EU level, which I think is very, very important. Mr. Tarabella, maybe I could pass on to you for some final comments as well.
But maybe to ensure you that we are not focusing on the situation in Saudi Arabia only because the G20 summit. I think that already in the past, for example, I remember for a long time now, 15 years, and when we receive the spouse of Haif Badawi, when we attribute the Sakharov Prize, but also I think the case Khashoggi, but human rights and women, because I was also at those times a member of the Women's Rights Committee. And I think that we continue to push and to be careful, and in particular, as vice chair of the delegation, with the new vice chair of the delegation with the country of Arabic Peninsula. Of course, we don't have a resolution each month because there are many countries in the world where we have other problems, but regularly. I think that we have to push on the agenda when the country, and in particular Saudi Arabia, in this resolution, it was taken and decided because the situation, and Ernest Urtasun, my good colleague and friend, remind that because the situation of the migrant worker from Eritrea, Ethiopia, and but not only, and I think that in this resolution we had our wish to have a focus on all issues still pending, and I think that in the future we are in contact, we are in touch to continue to put pressure, because I think that it's possible that they are sensitive to the image that they try to vehiculate. Probably, I hope, positive in the future, but still now they say that it's more positive, but in the reality, not for the case of your sister, Mrs. Alatul, and many other activists, journalists, also member of the royal family, Prince and Princess Besma. I remember Prince Salman bin Abdulaziz bin Salman and others. And I think that we have to insist on the necessity to have a clear evolution, because of course Saudi Arabia is the biggest country of the peninsula, is a very huge role to play in the relation with the Middle East, and of course, but they have also, I think, to give a better image in the reality and to have more right for many people. I'm also very attached to the situation of migrant workers, because I'm a son of a migrant worker from Italy to Belgium, and I don't forget that, and I think that migrant workers is a very important issue for me, for example. Okay, thank you to give the opportunity to have this discussion, and we continue the fight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarabella. As there are no questions at the moment from the journalists, I would just like to say that this letter, the petition letter with the 65 signatures, will be available on the Al-Qist website as of now or a few minutes.
Did you receive the letter by mail?
Yes.
Okay, you can share now.
In public. On that note, I would really like to thank you, Mr. Tarabella, Mr. Urtasun, but really everyone inside the European Parliament for their efforts on this petition and for voting in that resolution. It really makes a difference. I mean, political pressure, we have already seen it. Open political international pressure is what has worked with Saudi Arabia in the past. This is when they're encouraged to really make reforms, release prisoners. So what you're doing is paramount in the improvement of the human rights situation on the ground in the name of Al-Qist, maybe also in the name of some of the Saudi activists. I think it's great. Thank you. It is great to see that we have found a partner in our fight for fundamental rights and freedoms in Saudi Arabia in the EU Parliament. And it's reassuring also that you mentioned that this is an issue that goes far beyond the G20. So we look forward to collaborating with you on issues of human rights in Saudi Arabia in the future. And on that, I would say, yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be closing this press briefing now. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Legner. Thank you, Mr. Tarabella. Thank you everyone for this event.